Greetings, everyone. How are we doing today? We're just going to give a couple of minutes for people to join us. Still got a minute or so to go. Just so that I can see the chat's working and everything. Can people just put a one in the chat if you can hear me clearly? Put a one in the chat. If people can hear me, put a one in the chat. Excellent. That's one person. So for the others, if you can hear me, put a one in the chat. Thank you, so that I know that everyone can hear me. So I'm not just talking to myself. So I'm just checking my phone because I know some people like to text me. Okay, excellent. A few more ones coming through. Okay, excellent. A few more ones coming through. That's good. How is everyone doing this evening? Has everyone had a good day? I hope everyone is well. So I'm really excited about today. For those who sent in your questions beforehand, some really interesting questions, some really good questions around managing fears. So we've got you got some really good stuff coming up. While the session is running, if any questions do come up for people, then you can just write them in the chat. But I mean, I've got quite a few questions to get through anyway. I'm not sure if I'll get through all of them within the hour. So that's a good thing anyway. We've got a good start. So I think we'll just crack on because we've got a lot of content to get through. So the first question that I wanted to tackle was a question that was asked: how many types? So I'm going to be jumping from pages. So how many types of fear is there? And so in terms of fears that people may have, you can have a fear about anything. There's hundreds and thousands of fears. But in terms of the types of groups that fears would fit into, there's three categories. So the first one would be what we call rational fear. And so rational fears occur where there is a real imminent threat. Okay, so there is something that is apparent, it's clear that this thing is happening and it's taking place in the present. Yeah. So if a dog starts to chase you, yeah, that's a rational fear. You're going to run for your safety. Or if someone is wielding a sword and they're running after you, that's a rational fear. It's imminent threat. Okay. The second one is what we call primal fear. And primal fear is defined as an innate fear that is programmed into our brains. Okay, so these would be fears of spiders or fears of snakes. So they're these fears that occur naturally because of human evolution. So we know that there's spiders that are poisonous and we know there's snakes that are poisonous. So there's that kind of primal fear that we are geared and influenced by. And then the third and the final one is irrational fear. And this is the one that gets the majority of people. This is the one that plays havoc in our lives. And irrational fears are the ones that don't make logical sense and can vary greatly from person to person. So, for example, fear of clowns, yeah, or fear of the unknown. So, these are kind of those irrational fears that actually take a life of their own, take, this own life of its own in our minds, you know, and so they can really hold people captive. So, yeah, it's really important that we be aware of these different types of fears and when they are, manifesting in our lives. So, hi, Milena. Hi. Glad you're with us. So, the second question was a question asking to define fear. So, what is the definition of it? And so, fear is an unpleasant emotion caused by the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Okay. So it's a feeling that comes upon us, and it's an unpleasant feeling and emotion, but it's often caused by danger, imminent threat, pain. So it's the fear of pain, it's the fear of failure, yeah, or harm. It's a fear that someone's going to harm us, whether that be emotionally, mentally, or physically. And fear can cause terror, dread, anxiety, horror, and distress. So, as a result of fear, we can experience all these other types of feelings and emotions. Now, remember that because there's a question later on asking about the link between anxiety and fear, because they are interlinked in some ways. So, remember what I've just said there. Now, in terms of fear, these are not definitions that I'm going to talk about now, but there are three things that I use to explain fear to help us to have an understanding of it. And the first one is fear is the fire that fuels the furnace of dis-ease. I'll say that again. Fear is the fire that fuels the furnace of dis-ease. So, what does that mean? If you think about a fire that you have in your house or someone may have in their house, and they need to put, wood, in there continuously to keep that fire burning, to keep it hot. Well, that's what fear is. Fear is that fire. And it fires you up with anxiety, and it fires you up with indecision, and it fires you up with procrastination, and it fires you up with uncertainty. And it fuels that furnace of dis-ease mentally, dis-ease, feeling uncomfortable, not knowing, being unsure, double guessing yourself. And that's what fear does. It's a fire that fuels you in those areas of dis-ease. The second thing, how I'd like to explain fear, is that fear is acidic. Now, for anyone who knows about pH balances and knowing in terms about how we can keep our body healthy, is that we need to be more alkaline than acidic. Because when we are alkaline, when our body is alkaline, diseases are not able to stay in an alkaline body. Many of the sweet and sugary stuff are acidic, and that's why they create the problems and the health problems when we're eating too much of unhealthy stuff. So I say fear is acidic and courage is alkaline. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure we are eating more alkaline courage than what fear we're eating. So when fear comes, we need to translate that and change that into courage by eating off the alkaline food within us. And so it's our jobs to push ourselves past the acidic into the alkaline mental diet. And so our thoughts, what we're thinking about, what we say to ourselves, they need to be alkaline based. Not I can't do it, but I can. And so it's really important that we are aware of what's happening within our minds. And the third thing, how I would explain fear is like having constipation in your head. That is how fear works. So, like when someone gets constipated, and I'm sure all of us may have experienced it at least once in our lives, you feel bloated, you feel sluggish, you can't move the way you'd normally do. It's painful, it's uncomfortable, it leaves you just feeling groggy. And that's the same thing that fear does in our minds. And when we are constipated with those thoughts of doubt and double mindedness and limited belief systems, it calls for us to be constipated mentally. And we can never birth those thoughts, those mindsets, those attitudes that we want that will drive us forwards. And so that was how I would look at fear. Not just the definition, but also those things that helps us to have a more vivid understanding of what fear is and how it impacts on us. The next question, which I found really interesting, is what is the advantage of fear? And how can we use it as a motivation? Which I found very interesting. So I've got 4 things for you. Number 1, fear can keep you safe. Okay? So remember, there was 3 different types of fear. One of them is rational fear. And so it's, logical when if something's happened or if there is a situation where your life is in danger and fear kicks in, it then releases the triggering of our stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. And what they actually do in that imminent threat is give you more strength to fight harder or more strength to run faster. And so it can actually save you in some situations when you actually need that increase of energy from what fear brings. So it can save you. Number 2 is that fear is a motivator. So it helps us to move forward or make changes because it makes us uncomfortable. So I always say to people, there's 2 types of motivators, right? On the extreme ends of the continuum. One of them is desire, the other one is desperation. Both of them are very good motivators. When we strongly desire something, when we know our why and our purpose and we're driven, then we're willing to go through with it. It gives us that alkaline spirit because we know this is my passion. This is changing lives. This is something I'm doing for other people. It's not about me. It's a bigger purpose, and that can drive you forwards. But on the other side is desperation. And when we're in a state of desperation and that fear kicks in, it can also be a motivator because we don't like feeling uncomfortable. And so it can be a motivator. Fear can be a motivator. Now, hopefully, it doesn't be the second one too often that drives you, desperation. Hopefully, it is more about desire. But sometimes that is a motivator that's needed. When people hear damning information that if they don't change their diet or exercise, that the health implications and that fear triggers people into action. Yeah. Third one is that fear actually helps you to lose weight. So you actually burn more calories when you are in fear. Now, that's not to say now go and do things that's fearful all the time just so you can lose weight, but when you are actually fearful, you lose more weight. And the fourth one is that fear can bring personal growth. So embracing fear means embracing growth. So when you have a fear about something and you still push through and you do it, you're growing. And what you're growing in is resilience. So one of the things about resilience is it's not something you're born with. It's not something that you just have. It's something that is developed through every situation that you push through that you feel uncomfortable in doing. Because that's what resilience is. It's the bounce back ability. So when you're able to do something, and even if you feel down for a moment, but you get back up, even if you feel despondent for a moment, but you get back on, even if you're doubtful for a moment, but then you push through and do. Every time we do that, you're developing, you're growing. And so fear brings personal growth. And if you're not doing those things and embracing those things that are fearful, then you stay the same. And one of the things that is important that we do recognize is that we can only grow through the struggle. We don't grow when everything's fine. We don't grow when there's no challenge. And so often people think that the obstacles or the barriers are hinders in your way. No, they are the way. They are the way that we're meant to go so that we can grow. And anything that, we do, which is causing for us to have to develop our resilience muscles, our communication, our solving problem solving skills, all of those things are happening when we are facing situations that we're not comfortable with. If you have to have a courageous conversation with someone and you feel anxious and worried and fearful about it, that's okay. Feel the fear and do it anyway. And in that, you are growing. And you're going to see as we go along, um, in terms of fear, it's a relationship that we all have with fear, but we have to change the way that we see that relationship with fear. And you'll see what I mean when I come to one of the questions a bit later on. So the next question, which was asked, is how can I live with it? How can I live with fear? Which I thought was a really good question. How do we live with it? Well, first thing that we have to recognize, and I want everyone to remember this, is that fear is a universal experience. Everyone experiences fear. The only people who don't experience fear is people who have a mental deficiency. Something is actually wrong within their brain. We are hardwired in our DNA and in our limbic system to experience fear. It's something that has been hardwired into our system because it's paramount for our survival. But fear is a bully. And this is what we have to recognize. Fear is a bully. And just like any bully in school, college, work, or wherever it may be, the only thing that makes a bully stop troubling you is when you stand up for yourself. And so it's a continuous battle that we have to face with fear. But if we start to stand up to it and say no more and push forward and do that thing that we're meant to do, fear loses its power. And for as long as we stay silent and submissive and allow fear to rule us, what happens is the fear of what could happen makes nothing happen in your life. And so it's really important that we make a stand, that you take that step forward, that you try. Because fear doesn't allow people to be themselves. Fear doesn't allow you to be the best version of you. And so we have to choose courage. Fear wants you to stay acidic, but we have to become alkaline. We have to choose courage. And how we live with fear is that we have to understand every level of our lives brings a new fear that we must overcome. Every single level of our lives. Now, what happens is when you or I cheat the level that we were at and we jump onto the next level without dealing with that fear, we make the next level be twice as hard. And so, whether it is a small thing or a big thing, with whatever it is you need to deal with at that level, it's paramount that you deal with it. And I'll tell you why. The only reason why you won't experience fear is if you don't grow. If you are growing, fear will always be a factor in your life, but it's just a factor that you can address and deal with. So if you're going for a promotion and you get a new job, there's going to be a fear and an apprehension around that. If you are meeting someone new and you're worried about this relationship, is it going to work? Is this the right one? Should I marry them? There is a fear behind that. And so it's important for us to understand it's not that we should never fear. is that we should never allow fear to make the final decision. And so it's understanding that's why it's a universal experience. Everyone experiences fear. I remember I was reading an article about Bear Grylls, and anyone who knows Bear Grylls, like he does these amazing kind of, he'll go out into remote places in the jungle and stuff and survive. You know, there was one time where he fell down a mountain and he was paralyzed. He broke his back in however many places. And the doctor said to him, "You'll never walk again." And he walked again in 2 years and actually climbed a mountain in 2 years' time. But one of the things that he always said, he said, "I feel fear all the time. I just choose to not let it rule me." And so don't think there's anyone out there who doesn't have any fear. Everyone experiences fear, but some people don't allow it to rule their life. And so for every single one of you, don't allow fear to rule your life. It will come, but let it run with its tail between its legs when it comes to you. So the next question was, at what point does anxiety become fear? And I thought that was a really interesting question. So according to Mind, which is a mental health service, they state that anxiety is what we feel when we are worried, tense, or afraid. Okay. Now, some of those examples will be things of when you are also experiencing fear. Fear can make you be worried, tense, and afraid as well. So, both of these, anxiety and fear, are alerting signals and they appear to prepare the body for different actions. Now, the difference between them is anxiety is a generalized response to an unknown threat or an internal conflict. So often people can experience anxiety and they don't know why. Because often with anxiety, it is the overthinking and things going on in the mind. And so it's unknown. Like people don't know often why it is. Or it could be an internal conflict. Yeah. It could be the fact that I've got to do this presentation tomorrow and I'm really anxious about it. Yeah. Fear is often focused on known external danger or future events. So, quite often with fear, it's based in the future. And it's our projections, it's our assumptions, it's our imagination, it's how we are projecting what that external danger will be for us in the future. And so, it's really important for us to be aware of that because it's the narrative that we are saying. Oh my gosh, if I have to, when I have to speak to that person tomorrow, I bet they're going to be really angry. I bet they're going to be really resistant. Oh my gosh, when I'm going for that interview tomorrow, bet I'm going to get the questions wrong. And so this fear is an external danger and it's a future event. And just picture this. The only place that fear exists is in your mind. That's the only place where it exists. And so it's really important that we be aware of what we are telling ourselves. Because if you've got a situation coming up and you feel a bit of fear and you tell yourself, I can handle this, I can do this, this is okay, I can manage this, you can go forth and do it. But if that fear comes and you start to agree with it and you start to amplify it, and you're talking about other things that fear has caused you to miss out on, then it's now a thing that you are giving life to. And so it's really important that we are aware of our thoughts. Because I always say where the mind goes, the energy flows. And if you focus on fear, fear becomes your reality. And so it's really important that we take stock of our thoughts because thoughts create things. And our thoughts are very powerful. The next question was, how does fear stop someone wanting to quit their 9 to 5 job and start their own business? And another similar question, so I'll put them together, was how and why can fear sometimes paralyze you? And I think this is really interesting because um, I'll come back to that about panic attacks in a sec. Um, so to answer this question, I think I'm going to give you an analogy. Okay, so we are all aware of parasites. Okay, so parasites such as fleas, lice, bed bugs, yeah, there are these things that are just disgusting. We hate them. They cause discomfort, they cause agitation, they affect us, they afflict us. Okay. Now we have mental parasites that people are not, they don't know it by this name, but those mental parasites are fear, limiting beliefs, and the inner critic. And these parasites are always attacking us, afflicting us, causing us to feel discomfort, causing us to doubt ourselves, causing us to see ourselves from a limited perspective and from a frame of reference that says we cannot do it. You see, the underlying power of fear is that we are telling ourselves that we cannot manage it. Whenever you're fearful of something, you're saying indirectly you don't have confidence in your ability to be able to do or overcome that area. And so these mental parasites, these limiting beliefs, these inner critics, the rats, the reoccurring afflicted thoughts, these are those mental parasites that are continuously breeding and manifesting in our minds. And we have up to 60 to 70,000 thoughts that we experience each day. How many of those are being influenced by those mental parasites? And I want to tell you something about limiting beliefs. So I don't know if people are aware of this, but the way how they are able to condition an elephant to stay still in a circus, what they basically do is they will tie it to a massive tree. Okay. And the elephant will try and move and it will keep trying to move and it will keep trying to move for days on end. And then eventually it gets broken. Its spirit is broken. And it says, what is the point? And once that's happened, and once the owners see that it stopped doing that, they will then tie it to a normal chair and the elephant will not move because it's now stuck in this limited mindset of saying, what's the point? I can't do it. And that's what happens with us. Situations that's happened in the past, failures that we've made, things that people said about us, and so we have this limiting beliefs about ourselves, this mental parasite, and it stops you from walking in your greatness. It stops you from shining in your power. It stops you from living your best life. And so we have to be aware of these mental parasites, and we have to slay them. We have to destroy them. We have to dismantle them. And we do that by affirmations. We do that by stepping forward and doing, because the best evidence is you actually doing it and succeeding. You stepping forward and realizing it wasn't even as fearful as you thought. You doing it and realizing that, oh, I can do this. I am good enough. I am strong enough. And so anything that you fear can be seen as a predator. And anything you seek can be seen as a prey. Fear tolerated makes you fear contaminated. And so the goal is to whatever it is that you are fearful of, do it. And it doesn't even matter if you fear, because even though you fail, you've won because you overcome fear. And when you get to the next level, you would already have that victory to say, do you know what? Last time when I was fearful about this, I did this and I was able to change and overcome. I can do it in this area. Because fear based thinking creates instability. And whatever we practice, we become good at. And so it's really important that we are addressing these issues, these mental mind traps that we are facing so that we can actually go forward and do what we need to do. So the question was asked, how about panic attacks? So panic attacks um, happen as a result of um, when anxiety levels go up, or when people are really anxious about something and their body goes into hyperdrive, basically. And so they experience these panic attacks because they're having difficulty breathing. Now, one of the major things of how we address panic attacks is your breathing. So when people are having a panic attack, their sympathetic nervous system is highly activated, which is their fight or flight response. And so, what we are meant to do, like even if an emergency ambulance is called, they're not going to give you medication. What they're going to do is they're going to give you a brown bag and they're going to say, take deep breaths. Because by doing so, you are then activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and your digest. And by doing that, you see, our breathing has the ability to actually change our moods. When you are doing slower breathing and your oxygen levels are, you're taking deep breaths and more oxygen's coming in and going out, it actually changes your mood. So one of the things that you want to be aware of is your breathing. And when you notice that your breathing starting to get shorter and shallower, know that your body is being activated for your fight or flight response. So the deeper and the slower that your breaths are, is the better it is in calming you. So we have the ability just by our breathing and our thinking to make ourselves well and better. And so that's really important to be aware of that factor. So the next question that was posed to me is how can we manage other people's fears, especially when we think that they are being irrational? So this is an interesting one. This is a really good one because I think it's important that we recognize that everyone's in a different place. So what do I mean by that? There can be something that someone else fears that you think, come on, man, what's that about? But then there could be stuff that you fear and someone else is like, man, I can do that easily. But there's three things that I would say for all of us to bear in mind. If you are ever working with someone or you have a family member or a friend who has fear around something, and you may feel to yourself, come on, this is being a bit too much now. Three things that's really important. The first one is empathy, the ability to see things from the individual's frame of reference. Why is it that that is such a fear for them? What is their history? What has happened to them previously? And I think it's about, finding out what's the reasoning behind that, because that helps us to have more clarity and it helps us to be able to empathize more. The second thing is seek first to understand. You can't relate until you know somebody else's journey. And so it's really important that we hold off judgment and we find out more information, because then we can understand and have more empathy when we realize, okay, that's the reason why. That's what's happened to you in the past. And the third thing is be what you want to receive. So it doesn't really matter if it's something that we can do really well that someone else is struggling with. Be what you want to receive. In your moment of weakness, what would you like from others? Do exactly the same, because we all have different strengths and we all have different areas of development. And karma tells us that no one escapes. If you do good, good is going to come back to you. And if you do bad, bad is going to come back to you. So I always say, wherever you can, in all that you do, help out, do your best, and be the example of what you want to receive, because it will certainly come back. So the next question was, oh, who's that? That's okay. So how do I overcome fear on a regular basis? And another person asks, what's the tools or strategies for managing it? The first thing that we have to recognize is the mind is the battlefield. All battles are won and lost first in the mind. And so it's important that we understand is a lot of this is what is happening and going on in the mind first. So think of it this way. All behavior is belief driven. Make a note of that. All behavior is belief driven. And so anything that we do, you see, if someone asks you to do something that you can find really easy to do, yeah, you will do it without batting an eyelid because confidence equals commitment. So because you are confident in that, because your belief that drives you is that I can do this easily, you would go forth and do that straight away. But if someone then asks you to do something that you feel you're inadequate of doing, or you're incapable of completing, or it's too difficult for you to do, delay, procrastination, avoidance is what takes place because the belief drives your behavior. Now, this is where it's important because in terms of overcoming fear, is the brain can modify itself based on experience. So what do I mean by that? If you don't ever address your fears, all you have is the memory of the other fear that you wasn't able to overcome. And this then modifies your brain to think, oh my gosh, I'm not capable. I can never do this stuff. If you overcome or even try to do something, even if you didn't do as good as you wanted, you will realize that the fear that you was thinking was actually irrational. And that modifies your brain to know the next time, let me go forward and do. And this is neuroplasticity. Yeah. Because whatever you start to do, you shape and reframe your brain by those experiences. So if you think about something that you was fearful of before, but you worked on it, and now you can do that thing without any fear. Why? Because the brain modified itself based on experiences. Every single one of us, when we was children, the first time when we tried to walk, we didn't do it saying, I can do this is going to be easy. We were fearful. We was like, and our parents would hold our hands, but now we can all walk. And so it's important to understand the brain is so powerful, but it modifies itself based on what you tell it. And this is why it's important to think the right things and say the right things about yourself, because your brain takes on board everything you say. Now, if you are thinking doubt, doubt grows. The same with fear, the same with anxiety or worry. So I want to ask you this question. Imagine now, I'm going to give you an analogy. So imagine you had two castles that you had to build, right? One would be a castle of negative thoughts, and one will be a castle of positive thoughts. And every single thought that you have is a brick. The question is, what castle will be finished first for you? Would it be the negative one or would it be the positive one? And so it's important that we understand that what we are thinking creates things. And if you're creating that castle that becomes a stronghold of negative thinking, this is why you can't move forward. But for those people who focus on the positive and give themselves affirmations and are thinking on the things that they can do and remembering the victories of the past that they were able to overcome, then they're able to build that castle that becomes their stronghold of positivity. And that's where the pessimist and the optimist comes from. The second thing is about reprogramming our minds. So, one of the things that many people fail to realize is the brain is designed to be customized in the early part of life, the first 7 years. The first 7 years of our life, we are in hypnosis state and we are taking in board everything that's happening to us, everything that's going on around us. We recognize what's acceptable and what's not acceptable based on how we're treated by our parents and our siblings and stuff like that. But that first 7 years is a programming. And then we implement those algorithms, those codes, those systems, those principles throughout life. And so what happens is some of the things that we were programmed in the early part of our lives are not necessarily serving us. They're outdated beliefs. And so what we have to do is we need to go back and reprogram some of those stuff. We need to remove some of those things that have held us and kept us bound. And so it's really important that we recognize and are able to go back and reflect and say, do you know what? That's not healthy for me. That was said, but that's not necessarily the truth. And it's when we do that that we can start to free ourselves up, because a head filled with fears has no space for hopes and dreams. And what's going on in our head can become more real than what's going on in our lives. And often with fear, it's our imagination and our assumptions added onto a situation that makes it seem more than what it actually is. And this information comes through conditioning, imagination, suggestions, and implications. These are all the things that have a role in why fear seems like the giant that can never be defeated. So, what we have to do, the way that we dismantle it, the way that we overcome it on a regular basis, is to take action. To get past it, we must go through it, not around it, we must go through it. It's only then that you realize how strong you are. It's only then that you realize that its bark is louder than its bite. And when we start to do that, when we start to realize it, when we start to embrace our fears and push through, feel the fear and do it anyway, you start to realize how unstoppable you are. You start to realize the potential that has always been within you. You start to see yourself in how you should see yourself rather than the mental parasites that have blinded you to see yourself as weak and unable and insecure. So, another thing that we have to do is we have to accept fear as a fact and not a force. There's a big difference. It's a fact that you're going to experience fear, especially in every level that you go to. But fear is not a force that can be that can hold you captive. You see, fear is just a response, but courage is a choice. And when we choose to use courage to overcome fear, that is when life becomes meaningful. And so it's something that you will experience, but it doesn't have to hold you back. And fear doesn't have any special power other than that you provide it with. And that's important to remember. We give it the power by how we look at it, by how we bow to it, by how we surrender to it. But just like with any bully, as I said earlier, fear is a bully. Once you challenge it and address it, it will back down. It will back down. The next question was how to manage fear of the unknown. Okay, fear of the unknown, that irrational fear that captures many of us. So, the reason why the fear of the unknown is so powerful is because of what I call the three U's. Okay, it makes you feel unsafe, uncomfortable, and uncertain. I'll say it again. It makes you feel unsafe, uncomfortable, and uncertain because it's unknown. It's uncharted territory. It's a new beginning. It's something that you've never done before. And so, with that, we then create the picture of what could be. And unfortunately, often the bricks are negative, which adds to that castle, and it says it's going to go bad rather than it can go well. And so, again, it's really important that we are aware of what we are thinking because wisdom tells us not to entertain thoughts that weaken us. Second thing is that we need to remind ourselves that inaction breeds doubt and fear. Whenever we don't do, in fact, do you know that whenever you pause or you hesitate or procrastinate, it actually triggers something in your brain to tell you a danger or a problem is there. And it causes what we call the spotlight effect. So it magnifies that situation as a defense mechanism to make you get away from it. So inaction actually amplifies fear. It actually makes fear seem even greater because your brain has a defense mechanism to say, she stopped, he stopped, something's wrong here, get them out of there. And it amplifies how fearful that situation feels to you. But action breeds confidence and courage. So when you step forward and do, then it actually gives you the confidence and courage because you realize that actually this is manageable. I can do this. This is okay. And then the final thing is that we have to remember that confidence isn't an assurance that it will work out, but the willingness to try. I'll say it again. Confidence isn't an assurance that it will work out, but it's the willingness to try. I want to know today, are you willing to try and face one of your fears today? If you are, put a one in the chat. If you are willing to just try, based on what we're talking about today and what you're hearing, are you willing to try? If you are, put a one. I hope people are willing to try. I hope today that you're willing to try, that you're willing to say, do you know what, with whatever this thing is that has been holding me bound for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 3 months, whatever it may be, I'm willing to try. Because I guarantee you, if you try, you will realize how much you can actually do. And I'm telling you from experience, there is things that have held me bound for many years. And once I chose to do differently and overcome it, and when you do, the liberty and the freedom that you will start to experience is off the charts. So I encourage you, face that body today. Face that body today, and I guarantee you, you will begin to walk in a new confidence. And I want to tell you this, and this is another thing. Write it down, put it in your phone, write it on your laptop, whatever it may be. Your greatest fear carries your greatest growth. Your greatest fear carries your greatest growth. And so use fear or it will use you. Remember what I said about fear? Is that there's two continuums, desire and desperation. Even if it's by desperation, but don't allow fear to win the war. It may win a battle here and there, but don't let it win the war. Don't get to the end of your life and be on your bed before you're about to transition and have such regret that you didn't try, that you didn't do, that you didn't grow. Because I tell you, one of the richest places on earth is the grave. Why? Because it is filled with dreams, goals, passions, desires, things that people had within them that they wanted to do, but they allowed fear to cripple them. And they died with those things that could have changed the world, that could have shaped it in a completely different way. And so I encourage you, man, face your fears because your greatest blessing, your growth is lied up inside that fear that you're not choosing to face. The next question that I was asked was, How to help others explore fear. So, how can you help others to explore fear? I'm going to give you 7 quick tips. Number 1, take their fears seriously. That's the first thing. If someone is coming to you about a fear that they have and you laugh it off or don't take it seriously, what you are saying to them indirectly is that you are pitiful. Like, why are you even fearing about this? And what is that going to do for their confidence? What is that going to do for their ability to then go forward and address their fears? So take their fears seriously. Second thing, try to understand, ask questions, find out where this is coming from. Is there evidence base behind this fear? Like, why do you have this fear about this thing? What's happened in the past? So try to understand. You can never really understand someone until you understand their journey and where they're coming from. Yeah. And one thing that's really important is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So trying to understand, having empathy, and trying to get to the bottom of what this is powerful. Don't apply pressure. Okay. Don't tell them just change, just do this. Yeah. Just think about if there's something that you've been really anxious or worried about. If someone just said, just do this, come on, get on with it. Yeah. So don't apply pressure. Ask what helps. What do you need? Sometimes people may just be sounding off to you so that it gives them the space to clear their head and then they can go and do what they need to do. Find out what helps. If they want advice, then you can give advice. But ask first, what do they want? Encourage them to challenge their negative thoughts. Okay? So, you know, things like when we are experiencing a certain thought or feeling, we have a great tendency to magnify it. And so, you ask them, what's one thing you can do to challenge this thought? Is it really that bad? On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think that this situation could harm you? So you're doing things to help to challenge those thoughts, because those negative thoughts, those reoccurring afflicted thoughts, the inner critic and all of those things can really be overpowering sometimes. And so people can't see the sky for the trees. So helping them to challenge those negative thoughts. Another thing is stay calm. You see, what happens is we feed off each other's energy. We are also energy. Yeah. As human beings, we are energy. Right. When you look down at the core, underneath the atoms and everything, is energy. It's pure energy that vibrates. So when you stay calm, you have the ability to make that reflect on another person. And this is why it's important to be careful of who you are around. That's why they say don't make friends with an angry man, lest you learn his ways. Yeah. So when you stay calm, you can allow your calmness to ooze off onto that other individual. And finally, encourage them to seek help. Okay. So sometimes people may need additional help. So whether that is, something like mind or charity, whether it is coaching or counseling or therapy, or whether it is, just finding someone who they can really talk to about their situation, but encourage them to seek help. The worst thing that we can do is suffer in silence. So it's really important to ask people, and to get help, to show people that there is a different way. You don't have to struggle by yourself. The final question that I was given was, would shyness play a big part with struggling with fear? And the answer is yes. Yeah. Shyness is a feeling of fear or discomfort caused by others, especially in new situations or amongst strangers. Yeah. So it is an offshoot of fear. It's an unpleasant feeling of self consciousness, a fear of what some people believe others are thinking. Yeah, that's what shyness is about. So you're worried about how people may think about you, what they may say about you, what they're thinking, in regarding to what you're doing or how you're dressed or how you look. So the underlying factor there is fear. And this fear can inhibit a person's ability to do or say what they want. Because what happens is subconsciously they become a people pleaser. I will do this so that I will be accepted. I will do this so that they like me. So it can also prevent the formation of healthy relationships, because what happens is you end up not being who you are. And so, you're living with a mask, you're wearing that mask. And so eventually what happens is people get tired of doing that. And then when you start to show who you are, that person's never known that individual. And so it can create problems in relationships. Shyness is also linked to low self esteem. Okay. And it also can sometimes be the causes of social anxiety. So it's really important, that we are working on ourselves, and that we are being mindful of things that are affecting us and things that are influencing us, and we are taking the steps to grow and develop. But in order to do that, we have to be willing to face our fears. So that was the last question. I do have a couple of bits just before I offer up if anyone wants to ask any final questions. Um, I'm going to put in the chat a link to a workshop that I'm going to be doing on the 26th of February, which is on mental resilience. So it's a workshop on mental resilience. So if any of you are interested, I know some people have already registered for that, then do join that. That is going to be a powerful presentation that I'm going to be doing on mental resilience. And that stuff would also help in terms of dealing with fear. If some of you are thinking, how can I learn a bit more? What's other stuff that I can do? To talk about is my new booklet that I have designed, which is on self-awareness and empowerment. It's a toolkit. It is available on my website, and it covers a whole range of different things on self-reflection, on affirmations, on comfort zones, on the ABC activity. So that's the activating event, our beliefs and the emotional consequence that happens as a result of that. It also looks at exploring negative thoughts and feelings, addressing negative thoughts, looking at enablers, tempters, and supporters. So, who are those people in your life that are the enablers? Who are the people that are the tempters? And who are the people that are the supporters? It looks at setting smart goals. It's also got the circle exercise, which looks at the different factors in your life, where they are in terms of your goals and and the people that are in your life, and how you want to make those changes. It gives you a toolkit to deal with that. Exploring motivation, and it also has self empowerment quotes. So if you do want to pick up a copy, like I said, it is on my website, which is www.edifyinganswers.com. I will put it in the chat so that if people are interested, you can go along and pick one up. Um, Actually, this is the direct link to that. There is actually a few booklets that I do have on my website. There's also one on um, being values driven, and there is also another one on the 30 days influence challenge. So looking about how you can make changes and influence and make those positive changes in your life. So they're all available on there. So that, oh, the final thing that I wanted to give an update on. So next month, the live stream event is going. I'm going to be talking about the 10 steps for self empowerment. The 10 steps for self empowerment. If you are interested in that and you think that that's going to be a good thing, put a 1 in the chat. 10 steps for self empowerment. If that's something that you think you want to be a part of and you want to attend that, put a 1 in the chat. And so, um, That's great. I thought no one was interested. I was thinking, okay, so that's good. So we've got a few people. So I will keep you updated on that, and I will send out the information so people can register for that event. And the final thing for me is there any final questions that anyone has before we wrap up for today? Also, just to let you know, at the end of the next live stream, I will be giving a free copy away of my booklet. So share it, let people know in the next live stream event. Tell people to come along. The one thing that I ask for people to do, and I'll check it, is that you have to subscribe to my YouTube channel. So in order to win it, so the names will be, so people would need to register via Eventbrite. I will be sending out the links and everything so that I've got the names and stuff, and I will be choosing one of the people from those who have registered and who have subscribed to my YouTube channel. So those are the two things that you have to have done. But spread the word and let people know. When I do send out the information, please pass it on to others. But someone will be a lucky winner and they'll be blessed by this awesome tool. So if there's no more questions, thank you all for your time today. And as always, I say stay blessed and walk in your greatness. And remember to eat your alkaline diet of courage. So take care, everyone, and stay blessed. Oh, I've got a question. Okay. So, from your experience, is fear ever exterminated? Have any examples? So, yeah, I've got an example. So, a couple of years ago, when I went to Turkey with my family, and my wife said to me um, that she wanted to go skydiving. Now, I had a fear of heights. I had a real bad fear of heights. And I think if anyone else had asked me to do it, I would have just told them to go and jump. But my wife, it was my wife's bucket list. It was something that she wanted to do with a bucket list. And I knew that we may not ever be there again and be able to do it. And so I said, okay. I said, let's do it. Let's do it. And this is that thing of fear. Now, I was fearful, but I just pushed through. I said, let's do it. And so we paid for it. I said, let's pay for it. I paid for it straight away because I knew once I paid, I couldn't get out of it because it was a lot of money. Okay. Because I paid for myself, me, my wife, and my children. Yeah. So it was a lot of money now. So when we were driving up to the, because it's like this massive cliff it was a 10-minute drive up a cliff. Just remember, I'm afraid of heights, yeah? 10-minute drive up the cliff. And while we're going up this cliff, like I'm praying, I'm doing all this stuff because I am pooing bricks. I'm not even lying. Like I'm not going to try and pretend like it was all good. Like I was distressed, yeah? But I knew I had to do this. So when we get to the top, and it like you're at the top of this cliff and there's a massive slope that you've got to run down before you jump off, right? So I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? So cut a long story short, right? They saddle me up and everything, and I'm thinking, and he says, right, so the guy is behind me, and he says that when I tell you, you need to run, you need to run. So he goes, go on, sir, run, I run, I run, and I jump, right? And I jump off, and for the first, I would say 2 minutes, like I was petrified. After that 2 minutes, total bliss, total bliss. One of the best things I've ever done in my life. One of the most peaceful places I was, right up next to the sky. And I tell you what, how powerful it was. As I was coming down, because you're up so high, as I was coming down, when I got to the level where I was just above buildings, that seemed low to me. That was normally something that would make me queasy. But just by that experience, automatically fear was dismantled. It was dismantled. And straight away my level of resilience was boosted straight away just by that experience. So that's why I say to you, when you face the fear, it's dismantled. It's no longer the same. It's no longer the same. So I encourage you all, in whatever that fear is that you've got to face today, or tomorrow or the next day. Once you face it, you will be changed, because it's always a case of what am I becoming? It doesn't matter if if you went for a job interview and you didn't get it, but the fact that you faced your fear, you've become something different. It's changed you. Your resilience muscles have grown. And so I want to encourage you and just say, whatever it is that you are facing, go in alkaline spirit, take the courage and do it. And I guarantee you will not be the same. You will not be the same. So on that note, I leave you all. Say stay blessed and take care.